Hi, thank you for joining us today. We're with Lee Kemp, the Vice President of Customer Experience at Veritiv. He has developed and led successful award-winning global CX programs and strategies for Fortune 500 companies. He's also an Army veteran. First and foremost, I want to thank you for your service. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Excited to be here and excited to talk about CX and all the great things that we're doing at Veritiv and really across the CX profession.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat too. Why don't we dive right into that? Why don't we have you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you are, and what you're passionate about?
Yeah. So again, Lee Kemp, currently, Vice President of CX. I didn't expect to find myself here, really. I mean, it's one of those interesting things that I think you find a lot of leaders in the CX space have just happened to find themselves in a CX function or role. I actually have a supply chain operations background, and so I spent the majority of my civilian career in that space. The opportunity presented itself to help stand up a global CX program at my last company, and just what an extraordinary experience to bring that knowledge and perspective of operations, supply chain, other aspects of the business, merging that with the commercial sales and customer service functions, right? To really develop, I think, best in class CX strategy and performance. Again, you find yourselves in these opportunities, and you gotta run with it. You gotta give it your best, and just get started.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think sometimes you just gotta dive in the deep end and learn by fire. Um,
Yep.
you have a ton of great experience at this company and your previous company. What advice would you give somebody for their first 100 days leading a CX department?
Yeah, it's interesting. It depends, I think, on the role that you're in, but regardless of that, the most important thing you can do is listen. Uh,
Hmm.
I had the pleasure of for my master's program, I got to actually speak with Jack Welch,
Wow.
and there was a question that was asked from the panel, of, hey, I'm going into this new company, this new role, what do I need to do my first 90 days? And Jack Welch said, shut up and listen, right? And then that's my advice is you've got to listen. Whatever ideas you may have, they don't matter if they don't work for that business or for that function, or for your customers, most importantly. So there is that listening component. So, for example, new in the role here at Veritiv, I've been on what I consider a listening tour for the last 120 days, and it's incredibly informative to just listen. Beyond that, you need to start to collect data, whatever it may be, in whatever form it is. You need to understand what are the metrics that you're using. How does the business measure productivity and performance and customer satisfaction today? Don't start with the solution. You've really got to slow down, look at what exists, because you might have some gems there, right? There,
Hmm.
there may be some phenomenal data that already exists before you try to bring some other fancy new thing into the mix and just further complicate it. So first 100 days, listen, and really start to collect that information on how the business is running today.
That's great advice. I agree completely with that. After your first 100 days, what is your current strategy focus on, and what are you planning on in the future?
Yeah. So I mean, after that first 100 days, you really start to decide what's missing in terms of the basic CX strategy, and what are we going to need that's really going to deliver value.
Hmm.
A lot of times, again, we allow our personal uh, preference and passion or ideation to drive it, and that's really a disservice to the business. You have to ask yourself, what's going to deliver value to the business tomorrow?
Hmm.
Uh, and I try to simplify CX because I think in the CX profession today, with the proliferation of influencers and all of the digital solutions and the next way to measure customer satisfaction, we overcomplicate it. And I think we really
Hmm.
scare a lot of people away from just doing something. And so it comes down quite simply to you need to listen and then you need to act.
Yep.
And so that strategy that you need to develop needs to ensure you're doing those as basic as it may be. if the most you're going to do is get NPS, if you've at least got customers answering the one question, providing you some measure of voice of customer, that's a start, and that's
Hmm.
good. Move in that direction. So you've got to begin to outline that near-term and long-term vision for where you can go. But it's got to be prioritized by how you're going to deliver value in the near term, or you will lose all credibility with the business, with the C-suite, with the stakeholders. You've got to really be able to align it with the current strategy and the needs of the business and the needs of the customers today and tomorrow.
So how do you align that with the strategies, and how do you show that value? I guess, how do you measure success with these strategies?
Yeah, I think you have to ask the right questions. Again, it's that listening approach. Don't show up with all the solutions, right? Ask the questions, even if they're super obvious, even if you know what the answer is going to be. Number one, it enables the stakeholders to feel like they've had a place in that ideation, in that decision
Hmm.
making, right? They're a part of the process. But it also ensures that there is at least discussion. There may be some discovery as a result of going through the most obvious process or question. So ask the right questions and challenge the business. Okay, that sounds right. Is there data? Can you show me? Right. And then I think the most important thing in keeping that credibility is you're never wrong by asking the question in whatever meeting it is, whatever process we're discussing, how does this affect the customer?
Hmm.
If if you can remain that absolute advocate for the customer, you're always going to have credibility. Now, you might be a nuisance. There might be some who don't love the fact that you're throwing a wrench in every plan, but at least you can come back to that point that I am the advocate for the customer. I represent them in every discussion, and I've got to make sure that we're delivering value for them. I think that's how you maintain that credibility and really establish that presence within your stakeholders and that leadership team.
I want to dive into that a little bit more. So how do
Yeah.
you, that was a great answer, but I want to focus in on that last note. How do you establish that buy-in with the C-suite and leadership?
Well, obviously numbers matter.
Yeah.
So anytime that you can pull together some ROI, right, that's usually important. And a lot of times that's a data exercise. It's not as simple as it was just saying, hey, we've reduced churn by X, right?
Hmm.
That's one aspect of it. And you can't always attribute an improved customer experience or maybe an improved process or some new thing that we've given the customers. You can't always say that that's how we reduce that churn.
Hmm.
So you have to find other ways. While with Univar, we had done some remarkable work with our data scientists, with our analytics team, where we're able to actually identify the ROI of moving your detractors to promoters or the inverse, promoters going to detractors. You actually had customers who are participating in that NPS survey process consistently. And so you could track their movement from, promoter to detractor or vice versa. And we could actually then assign or attach to that the value in which they were bringing to the business. That was huge. We were able to articulate to our stakeholders, to our senior leadership team, that there was significant more value in those detractors moved to promoters as compared to the rest of the growth in the business.
Hmm.
That matters, right? Then suddenly you see your CFO light up. You see the CEO say, okay, or maybe other business leaders who weren't totally bought in. So data matters, ROI matters. It's difficult at times, but it can't ever be one thing. It can't just be we reduce churn. NPS has gone up. There's a few things you have to do around it. The other piece I think that's really important is interviewing the customers,
Hmm.
bringing their perspective, and do it in a video, by the way, kind of like we're doing today.
Hmm.
See which customers, the ones that love you and the ones that hate you. Have the conversation, share those personal experiences with stakeholders and with the C-suite so that they can see firsthand. So it's not just your version of the truth, it's direct from them. So those customer interviews, I think, are really powerful for the business to see how what we're doing or not doing is effective or affecting them day in, day out.
Yeah, and it's hearing it straight from the horse's mouth. Nothing
Yeah.
can be better than that. I love that. So now that you've got buy-in from the C-suite and you're
Mhm.
measuring your success and you're doing all the things you need to do, I'm sure there's some things that are a bit of a thorn in your side. What pain points do you have when you're leading a team like this?
Yeah, it's so two things I'd say. So one is, it's a challenge if you're managing strategy by itself. And so
Mm-hmm.
if, in my prior role, my boss and I, we were responsible for the strategy, right? We didn't have the burden of the organizational leadership. We didn't have teams to manage. We were able to focus entirely around strategy. But then you have the complexity of managing without authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of influencing without authority. And so you're trying to steer the business in directions that they may not want to go. Sometimes there are the sacred cows, so to speak, of there are these metrics that we use day in, day out to measure our performance, but maybe they're not necessarily through the lens of the customer. So there's
Mm-hmm.
some challenging conversations you have to have, and you have to convince those stakeholders this is the right thing to do, or at least it gives us a different uh, a different vantage point than we had before. But then you have the other side that many of our CX leaders are in, where they are not only responsible for the strategy, but they also have to run the business. They have
Mm-hmm.
elements of the business they're responsible to manage. So in my new role now, not only am I responsible for the strategy, but I have our entire customer solutions organization as well. That's a huge responsibility. And so you have to balance that out. The advantage, you have a huge portion of the business that you are directly responsible for, and you can say we're going to do these things. But then it's also, how do you find the time to focus on both strategy and running the business? And I tell you, you got to have the right people. You have
Mm-hmm.
to have the right people that are truly customer centric, that can manage that day to day effectively, while you can still also focus on that higher level strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. Something popped in my brain during your answer there, and you mentioned it before. You were talking about the customer interviews you were using to get buy-in from the C-suite. Do you have a specific example of where you've used customer feedback to improve a business?
Absolutely. One of the things that businesses typically are really good at is in an emergency, right? They bring everything to bear, right? They are taking care of the customer. It's whatever it takes. This is an important customer. They're shut down. We've got to make this happen, right? They're really good in emergencies. Um, what we realize is we're not as good in the day to day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because we are not as focused on that singular issue as a collective team. And so what we would hear from our customers, though, is while they appreciated the full court press, right, to make that thing happen in the moment, they really wanted to know as far out as possible that we were potentially going to fail. We really started to align to failing fast. You have greater loyalty with your customers when you are transparent early.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know, uh, customer A, we might not have this product in time. We want to tell you it's 2 weeks out. We're giving you a heads up, right? Data tells us, or this supplier is indicating this may not be available in time. We want to give you the opportunity to make the adjustment on your side. Are you comfortable if we were to push this out, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
honest in advance. And a specific example of that, when we were doing those video interviews, customers shared with us, hey, your competitor said, oh, no, 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 we've got it. We're going to get you that product. We had told them we didn't have it available. It was going to be a longer lead time. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get them what they wanted when they wanted it. They went with the competitor in that case. That competitor failed miserably and let them down.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they appreciated the fact that we were honest, that we could not deliver to them when they wanted it, but that we could have it to them a few days later. They ended up getting that product from us. And that solidified our relationship going forward, that you are always honest about what you can and can't do. That enables my team to plan accordingly. Does it mean we're going to get every single order? No. Sometimes they may have to go with that particular provider of that service or that product. But by and large, they want to work with us because we're honest and we are consistent in our approach and in our performance.
I think honesty and consistency is tried and true, throughout the ages. What do you think is going to be the future of customer experience?
There's going to be a lot of innovation.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to talk about AI.
Yeah.
And I actually, my hope is that the future in CX is we kind of get back to some of the basics. Um, with all of this advancement in technology and capability and innovation, I think we actually do a disservice to the vast majority of our CX professionals across across the businesses, across the industries. We've got to help everyone understand that again, CX doesn't have to be hard. I would argue CX is actually quite easy because it comes down to again listening and acting. Now it's more complicated than that when you
Hmm.
start to continuously improve within those. But at the end of the day, it comes down to listening and acting. The hard part is the influence and the leadership. And so I'm beginning to see more and more focus around how do you do that effectively. And I think that's the direction we have to go. When you have all these different conferences and focuses, and it's always digital, 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 and the next website and the next AI. And I think that if we're going to be better as a profession, if we're going to be better for business, if we're going to maintain a seat at the table with the C-suite, it's going to be that we have to be effective at influencing and leading the organization through those complex challenges.
Hmm.
And so I really hope that that's the future of CX, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, is let's talk more about how do we do this effectively versus what's the next expensive toy that we're going to throw at you and try to get you to lock into that actually is not going to work because it's not going to be delivered well. It's not what your customers need. It's not going to drive action. You're not going to be able to influence and improve performance for the customer. So that's where I think it should go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Where it does go is probably around AI everything, how to use Chat GPT to solve everything. And quite
Hmm.
honestly, the solution to your customers' needs will always be predominantly human.
Yes.
It will not be always system based. And so if you think like a human and you act like a human and you're human to your customers, you're in a far better position to have a great relationship for the long term.
I agree. I want you to just keep talking. Why don't you hop on your soapbox right now and tell us anything else you want us to know?
I think I'm incredibly excited to be in CX. This is the other thing. If anybody's trying to figure out what it is or do I want to do it, I will tell you when the discussion was, hey, is this something you want to do for us? I'm asking myself, well, what is CX? I mean,
Yeah.
I'd been in our industry, I'd been with our company for several years. I knew customer service and all these kinds of things, but what are you talking about? CX, what even is that? Right. And suddenly you're immersed in the world and you start to get really excited because you realize it's all parts of the business. This is why at Univar we talked about we are all CX. I'm carrying that mantra into Veritiv. It's really important that we are all looking at the customer and realizing we all have an impact on the customer's experience. And it's a really exciting space to be in, to know that you can positively or negatively affect or influence the entire business end to end when you think about the customer journey from end to end. And so I think it's an incredibly exciting opportunity to be in that space. And so my hope is that we get more uh, CX leaders from various aspects of business. Whether you've been in finance, whether you've been in operations or sales. We're having that discussion in our organization today of, hey, you know what? If you've got some people on your team in CX that want to come over to sales or want to come over to operations, we'd love to have them. And I'm saying we'd love to have your people in CX. Like this is really, I think, a great place to cut your teeth, to learn more about the business, and to really be challenged to influence without authority. The more of us that can do that effectively, the better that we're going to be in the future for sure.
That's amazing. So how can we follow your career and get in touch with you?
Well, you can get in touch with me through LinkedIn. That's going to be the best way. So you can find me there on LinkedIn, Lee Kemp. I just look forward to talking with those. I mean, I'm always happy to have a phone call with someone who's, facing a challenge, trying to figure out, how to tackle that issue. If there's, groups of people that you want to just be, positively influenced to just get started, to not be overwhelmed by all the complexity that we again are throwing at you. I'm always excited to do that. So yeah, it's a great time to be in the CX profession. I think might be might be the Walker series, but they always talk about, there's never been a greater time to be,
Hmm.
a CX leader, and it's so true. That it's a phenomenal, extraordinary time in our profession and in business, and yeah. So I just look forward to talking and hopefully influencing others to get into this space.
Yeah, I mean, you're helping me. I'm learning a lot from you right now, and hopefully our audience will too. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you as well.